Hi, my name is Apolonio Polo Morales. I'm the political director with CHIRLA, the Coalition for Humane Immigrant Rights, and I'm here to tell you my story of self. So my story of self begins with my grandfather. My grandfather was actually a bracero. He came from Jalisco and in the 1950s, and he worked the fields all up and down California. He picked cotton, he picked cabbage, different types of vegetables and fruits. And what he would do is he'd go back to Mexico and he would bring some money to the family. So this went on for many years, and eventually the program was phased out. But he still had this desire to come to the US, and that desire translated into my mom's desire to come to the US. And so she came to the US as an undocumented immigrant. So she followed my grandfather's footsteps. There was no bracero program, so she was undocumented. So when she first got here, she started packing turkeys, and then she became a seamstress. So lo and behold, her aspirations of becoming a nurse never really came into fruition as she got stuck into the system of trying to stay alive and continue to eat and, have a roof over her head. Eventually, she became a single mom. I was born, my sister came second. And what ended up happening as a child was that we spent our times going out to the factories with my mom on the weekends. And we would do that because essentially there wasn't anybody to take care of us. So there wasn't much help. And so I grew up with the sound of roaring machines, and I grew up with the sound of Radio K-Love, which is really cheesy Mexican and Latin American music, love songs. And as I got to see my mom working in the factory, I realized that the situation wasn't very good. Her boss was constantly looking over her. Her boss was always harassing her, talked down to all the workers. And I remember being just a little kid and seeing that for the very first time and seeing my mom in that strange dynamic with her boss. But my mom always stood very strong for her beliefs, and she always pushed back, and she never let herself be pushed around. So that's something I also learned from her. And what came about as we grew up, my sister and I, is my mom always said, I wanted to become a nurse when I first came to this country, and I ended up working at a factory. And I want you to get ahead. I want to make sure that, you go off and pursue your dreams. So eventually I go off into college, and I go to UC Berkeley. And as I'm there, at this time, it was a very anti-immigrant time. It was a time of Proposition 187. Driver's licenses for the undocumented were repealed. And I really felt like I was not an American for the very first time in my life, despite what I had been told all my life going to school. So when I got to college, after the first year, it was tough, but I get a call from my sister around that time, and she says, "You got to come home because mom's sick." And so when I heard that, I'm like, "What do you mean mom's sick?" And my sister told me that mom had a stroke and she's paralyzed from half of her body, and you need to come down soon. So I took the first Greyhound bus from Oakland. I came down to Los Angeles, down on 6th Street in Skid Row, got out of the Greyhound, and then worked my way to the LA County USC Medical Center, where my mom was in the emergency room. And for the first time in my life, I saw this strong woman who had been so influential and always stood by her children, broken. And so I came to her, and I started crying. And I thought to myself, how can this happen? How can this be? And I told my mom right then and there, I'm going to quit college. I'm going to go back home here and help you get better. I'm going to be with you. And she asked me to lean closer to her. And then she looked at me in the eyes, and she could barely speak. I remember this. And she said, "You're crazy." She said, "You're not going to give up the opportunity that I had to get ahead." And so she told me, "Go back to school." And I went back to school, and thankfully my sister took care of my mother at the time. And what ended up happening is that moment changed me forever. And it was really seeing my mom in that state. But it also opened me up to this whole different idea of what immigrants have to do to survive and what they do for their children. And for me at that moment, remembering all the Proposition 187 commercials on TV and Pete Wilson being so anti-immigrant, it really became personal to me. And I decided that I needed to do something to change the circumstance. So as my mom got better, I became politically involved. And as I got politically involved, I became a union organizer, I was a community organizer, and now that leads me up to where I am today as a political director. And as time has gone on, I look back at that moment and I think about how We have to look at the suffering and the struggle of people and then try to do something and change it. And I feel at this moment in time, with what's happening in the country with this new administration, we need to get ahead. We need to organize ourselves. We need to be united like never before. And we need to take that pain and struggle and convert it into something positive. And for that reason, I'm working with the immigrant rights movement. I'm here with Chirla to make sure that our members and our folks that we work with in our community are getting ahead and we don't stop the fight. Thank you.